No rate cut from the Bank of Canada. Trump increases tariffs on aluminum and steel. Liberals do not seem interested in tabling a spring budget. And the Liberals take a third swing at censoring the internet. And EB not interested in a pipeline to BC Northern Coast. All that and a lot more on The Really Big Show. I'm Jim Csek with NowMedia. With me, Iain Burns, managing editor in our nation's capital. How are things looking out there in the center of Canada's universe?
Still quite smoky. It should be a perfect, beautiful day, but the wildfires are ruining that a little bit. The wind is blowing east, I think, so
Yeah,
it's all good news for BC.
Spectacular here in the Okanagan. In our live shot here, you can see that the skies are beautifully blue, and yeah, spectacular day here in the Okanagan. Bank of Canada, no rate cut. Some economists were expecting a rate cut. I was expecting a rate cut as well because a lot of the indicators are fairly negative. And it's with inflation at 1.7%. That was in April. The latest GDP data, meanwhile, showed the economy grew by 0.5%. And we talked about that extensively. And that was really due to front loading because of tariffs. And that was an annualized increase of 2.2 for the year. And then we had Melanie Joly and Francois-Philippe Champagne kind of saying that was the growth for the first quarter, but that's not the case. And, you know, like Macklin saying, most of this decision comes to the uncertainty around the U.S. trade tariff regime and then the talks that are going on. The bank's prognosis for the Canadian economy, though, quite gloomy. Discussing recent GDP data, it explained housing activity was down, driven by sharp contraction in resales. Government spending also declined. Labor market weakened, particularly in trade-intensive sectors. Unemployment has risen to 6.9%. That's a bad number. The economy expected to be considerably weaker in the second quarter. And with the strength in exports and inventory reversing, final domestic demand rising subdued. Despite that, the central bank insists the economy is not sharply weaker. So they're saying it's bad, but it's not as bad as it could be. So they're gonna pause. The next decision comes July 30th. And then, you know, there's a few more here, September, October, November, December. I think they're just trying to keep some powder dry in case they have to react. But, you know, the economy needs a rate cut in the worst way.
I think as well, the way that they've been talking about inflation suggests that they're not convinced by that low rate. And they think that there's a combination of a few things that are going on, mostly to do with energy and the consumer carbon price being ditched, but also falling oil prices worldwide. I think they're concerned that is misrepresenting the true situation with inflation, because obviously food prices are increasing and some other things are going up. And I think they're just, you know, they're absolutely obsessed with inflation, aren't they? At the sort of, sometimes people say at the expense of everything else. But they, they weren't a few years ago, though, were they? But
you look at that chart,
yeah, so that's what it is. I think they want to try and redeem themselves, maybe, for the COVID mistakes. But that seems to be what I got from reading those notes, and I listened to a little bit of Tiff Macklin. Seems to be that that's why they didn't cut, because they think inflation might actually be a problem.
Yeah, if you look at that chart, though, the inflation target is 2%, and then the inflation latest data was just below that line, yet they're holding here and waiting for, like I say, I think they're trying to keep some powder dry. There is still an expectation of 3 rate cuts this year, so they're going to have a housing crisis too, like a mortgage crisis, if they don't do something. I mean, you know, they're kind of playing this balancing act, and it's going to be a tough one because the economy, like the job sector, unemployment at near 7% is really bad, and lots of people right now aren't spending because they're scared they're not going to have a job. I mean, there's a lot of people worried about their jobs because of the economy. Well, even, you know, if you even talk about AI, a lot of people fear they're going to lose their jobs because of AI, the economy, a whole bunch of things. There's so much uncertainty out there. And I would say lots of businesses are reluctant to deploy more capital, and they're trying to keep their powder dry. So it's kind of the common theme of people keeping their powder dry. People aren't making big purchases like houses, vehicles, all kinds of things like that. So
yeah, well, that's the main element of Canada's GDP and Canada's wealth. It's not really wealth, it's just inflated asset prices. But the governing council point that out, don't they? And their notes here, they say housing activity down, driven by sharp contraction in sale and resales. People aren't buying houses. But then something that's quite interesting here is government spending also declined. And if you've been following the economic data in Canada for the last few years, for the Trudeau era, a vast amount of spending and really growth and economic activity was just the government spending money and just hiring people into sinecures. So it's kind of, and then later on in that, they obviously they mention unemployment, and then they say they expect exports to decline, which is like, mostly natural resources, but that's how we pay the bills in Canada, not recycling the money and being stupid with it, like giving people government jobs that don't, mean anything. That's how it, or buying overinflated assets like houses. Really, it comes in, doesn't it, from mostly the US.
And a lot.
So it's all negative. Like to me, that one paragraph there, it's one paragraph. That is very depressing reading, because it's like, where's the hope? Where's the redemption?
Where's the bright spot? Where's the bright spot? And I think that the biggest problem is why, the question to ask is, why would, big companies invest in Canada right now? And that's the question. And even, you take Mark Carney's Brookfield, where did it go? Went to the United States. Where did, where is some of the companies in British Columbia going? To the United States, because they say there's uncertainty. And, we talk about British Columbia. The public sector grew, government hiring, and the private sector is shrinking. So,
and it's just amazing, isn't it, to think that in all of this, as we sort of survey this landscape of blown up cars and death and gloom and misery, and we're thinking, like, what the hell can we do? The one bright spot that we do actually have, if you want to call it a bright spot, the one thing that works in this economy is the oil and gas sector, and to a lesser extent, I guess, like minerals and things and potash and all the rest of it. That works. That brings in money. And yet here we are, months and months down the line since Trump first dropped this nuke on our heads, and we're still having these increasingly stupid, trivial conversations about whether we're going to do the most basic things, like lift an emissions cap and stuff like that, whether we're going to build a pipeline to Prince Rupert. And it's like, these are still extremely controversial. David Eby is still saying, no way. And Quebec, obviously, and lots of other people. It's kind of like, nobody's taking this seriously. Not even Mark Carney is taking it seriously anymore, apparently. He stopped talking about it in apocalyptic language. So it feels like we are very much we're just back in business, back to the old way of doing things, of just managed decline. And just try and make sure that the decline is as comfortable as possible, and that we collapse into poverty in as gentle a way as possible.
Yeah, it's like a bunch of lobsters in a pot as it comes to boil, and they're arguing over who gets more space in the pot.
Yeah, but then also injecting morality into it, like it's not the right thing to do for you to get out of this pot.
Right, you stay in the pot. You belong here.
Protect the environment by staying in the pot.
And then this is from the Trump signed those tariffs. We got a little clip here.
President threatened to increase steel tariffs on social media. Now the White House says he has done it. They say he has now signed an executive order off camera here at the White House that raises steel and aluminum tariffs from 25% to 50%, effective at 12:01 a.m. tomorrow. Now, our Megan Casella, who's been going through the text here, points out that the UK gets some differential treatment in this executive order based on the agreement with the UK. But this is, as the president expressed he was going to do on social media. Now the White House says he has officially done it. So as expected, but obviously this was a post on social media that moved markets at the time.
And Melissa Lantsman put out a piece there saying the Conservatives are calling for an emergency debate on Trump's unjustified 50% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. And she said, the elbows up Prime Minister promised Canadians he was the man with a plan to stop the U.S. tariffs. And the UK got a carve out there, and
that's only I think that's only till next month. And that's also a bit of a weird one because the British don't really produce steel anymore. They have the most pathetic, worthless steel industry in the advanced world. And it's owned by, like, British Steel, I believe, is owned by China. I mean, it's all just, it's an absolute calamity, the British steel industry. It's not even feasible anyway because energy is too expensive and steel production requires a lot of energy. But these tariffs here on aluminium and steel, this is just an anti-Canada measure by another name, really. I think it's wrong to sort of bring other countries into it, even like Britain, because they don't even matter, really. They're of no consequence in these markets. Canada dominates the American steel and aluminium import.
This is
market.
Huge for Canada, and the Canadian steel industry urges government intervention amidst these tariffs. The head of the Canadian Steel Producers Association has urged Ottawa to act quickly after President Trump doubled tariffs on steel and aluminum imports to 50% starting today. Catherine Cobden said the new tariff will essentially shut down Canadian exports of the materials to the U.S., a crucial market for manufacturers. She also said the federal government need to increase tariffs on Chinese steel coming into Canada, warning that communist dictatorship will seek to dump excess supply after being locked out of the U.S. market. Yeah, so that's a huge concern as well, is that the Chinese will then take advantage of the situation and then dump steel into Canada.
They've done it before. I mean, they've done it to other countries, and they've destroyed those industries forever, and they can't be rebuilt. So it is that she's completely right when she says that's like an urgent situation. But then obviously, if you put added tariffs on China, then the Chinese will get upset about it, even though it's completely unfair for them to be upset about it. But they will get upset about it, and then they'll punish, probably some part of the agricultural sector or something like that, and help they'll work on dividing Canada, which is, not exactly a difficult thing to do. But that's probably what's going to happen. I was listening to her as well. She's been doing the rounds. She's had a very busy few days, that woman, the head of the Steel Association. And she said, she welcomes, I was going to say Angelina Jolie there. She welcomes Melanie Jolie's statement about how they're going to use Canadian steel and Canadian aluminium and all the rest of it to build out these projects that still haven't been even decided on, never mind started. But then this head of the Steel Association said, that's great and all, but like this has to happen now. It's not about a project that might not even have shovels in the ground till 2029 or something like that. That's not going to save Canada's steel industry. It has to be right now. So this is this is almost, I would imagine, at the top of Carney's list of things to look at, because like I say about Britain, it's lost its steel industry completely. If you lose your steel industry as an advanced 21st century economy, you stop being independent, even in a little way. You're not an independent country. You're not a serious country. If you can't produce steel, you're just a joke. You're nothing. So this is not a small issue, for sure. This is huge.
Yeah, even if you look like locally here in BC with aluminum, many of the wineries that are producing like ciders and that are still buying their cans from the United States, because there's no investment here. Do you know what I mean? Into making manufacturing facilities for that is people are the climate here to invest needs to change. It absolutely needs to change. And if they want to, we have a big aluminum and steel industry in Canada, but if they want to make some finished products with it, you have to change the environment here. You have to stop punishing businesses that invest here. Otherwise, they're not going to. And unless that climate changes, BC has basically chased almost every industry out of here.
But it's business as usual as far as I'm concerned. David Eby talked a very big talk, and he tried to present himself as at least the deputy captain of Canada after Doug Ford, and he was all about it, wasn't he? And he was going to hit back, and he got rid of American booze off the shelves and all the rest of it. And he did this bill, put a bill through that was considered to be draconian and extreme and all the rest of it. But I'm not so sure. I mean, it's still business as usual. There's been no major change to how to the tax regime or to the offer to entrepreneurs and companies. None of that's changed at all.
If you look at the focus of British Columbia and the NDP, if you look at the focus of what they get to the podium and talk about, it's the green agenda. That's what they talk about. It seems like they have a singular focus, and that's the only thing they really want to talk about and invest in. And that's not, I mean, like building aluminum cans for the many wineries here and cider cellars here. That'd be a good investment. All kinds of things.
Or like maybe that would require a recognition on their part that it hasn't really gone well during their time in office, and that something needs to change with the economy. But the only thing that EB and his team seem to want to change is they're talking about things like interprovincial trade barriers, which is just kind of.
And he hasn't signed. That's not going to
fix BC's economy.
And he's not part of the group that signed. Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and PEI. Yeah. They signed, but BC's not on that list. And I would say to the British Columbia government to buy a window and look out the window and see the amount of forestry that is here. And you have an industry that used to be BC's #1 industry that's in shambles. And you strike up a committee that's going to take a couple years for them to come back. And the industry says there's not enough industry representation there. So if there's not enough industry representation there, guess what they're not going to do? Invest in forestry. So you got the people, you need jobs, you need an economy, but you don't have the people that were going to invest sitting at the table to discuss the future of forestry. It's just
and while all this is going on, he's away in Asia, which makes me think that maybe he's just kind of given up. I mean, politicians are obsessed with symbolism, and I think it has to be taken as a pretty strong message and symbol that when the premiers met in Saskatoon with Carney, he was in Asia. I feel like that's like a sign. It's almost like Canada's not going to fix our problems. We're going to go to Asia and we're going to try and increase our exports to Asia. But then the problem is he's going to go to Asia and almost certainly quite a lot of the dignitaries over there are going to say, we want more gas or we want more oil. And he's going to say no. So I don't know. It's just a mess, isn't it? But it almost feels like a defection on EB's part that like he's already given up on Canada and this idea that Canada's wealth is to be found within its borders. He seems to not agree with that anymore because he's away looking at brighter pastures.
Yeah, we had some volume issues yesterday. My volume seems to be low, while yours seems to be high. So I don't know if you can fix that. Brian Lilly put this out, and he says there might be a trade deal between Trump and Carney before the G7 on the table. I'm not. Well, I guess we'll wait and see. But I watched that yesterday on the volume, and it seemed like I'm very, very quiet compared to Iain and Renee yesterday as well. So there you go. The federal government set to face its first confidence vote since the election as MPs cast their vote on that throne speech Wednesday. The Liberals don't seem too concerned.
I guess they just the whip will be very angry today and will hunt them down and make sure that they do it. But they still need, theoretically, for a majority, they still need more MPs than they actually have. So I don't know what their plan is. This will be interesting though, because with it being a confidence motion, like they really have to use all of their powder, kind of thing. They actually have to go take it seriously. So I'd be interested to see what it looks like, because that will give us an indication of what the future is like, basically, for this government and how strong it is and what it, whether the NDP or whoever comes in to their aid. It will be interesting to see the lay of the land.
Well, I think that it's really going to be a test to see if like they all voted for a budget, which it seems like, this is the next area. Budget protest gets the shrug, to see if they're actually going to put their money where their mouth is here. Because, Government House Leader Steve McKinnon yesterday dismissed a surprise Commons vote that shamed Cabinet for concealing federal finances. And all opposition parties approved the Conservative measure critical of Cabinet's delay of the 2025 budget. And, he said it's a non-binding advisory resolution, McKinnon told reporters. So I suspect you're going to see a lot more of them. And the reporter asked, you don't care about that? He said, well, I think the test of rallying votes comes on the vote of the throne speech Wednesday, which is a confidence vote. So, I mean, they don't seem too too bothered by it. So it'll be interesting to see if that the people that voted for the budget actually put their money where their mouth is and demand that budget be put down. Andrew Scheer said that. I'm just trying to find it here. A Conservative sponsored that amendment seeking a spring budget. There's no budget to show Canadians just how bad the situation is, what it might be facing in the future. And that's what Scheer told the MPs on May 28th. The lack of a budget is probably the most concerning thing we have heard from the government over the past few weeks. This is the number one job. But.
I mean, it's also like, what about the Carney's brand? That's what I was thinking yesterday. It's his brand is based on like he's the status quo and he's the orthodoxy and he's like the establishment, and it's like no, we're not going to abolish the CBC, you weirdos and freaks. Like we're going to keep the CBC because that's Canada, and like here are some hockey references from the 1980s. Everything's okay, people, and then he goes and like violates this pretty old tradition of, producing a budget. It's kind of, how is that on brand for like Mr. Establishment and Mr. like the rules-based order and all that? So if this is the beginning of a pattern as well, where he just breaks the rules, talks about how great the rules are and how how he's the defender of orthodoxy, and then he goes and just when in his own business just like smashes them to pieces, then eventually that contradiction will become apparent, I think.
Now, one of his key points when he was running an attack point that he used on Poilievre was that he had a plan, and that Poilievre had no plan, and yet he's not willing to disclose his plan. And this is something that the Liberals did. Cabinet in its last fall economic statement disclosed it missed the 2024 deficit target by 55%, from $40 billion to $61.9 billion. Largest deficit in Canadian history outside of emergency pandemic spending. The figure eclipsed the previous record pre-pandemic deficit of 55.6. So when's the last time they had a budget, and when have they stuck to a budget? I mean, it's just been a free-for-all. And here's the guy that many Canadians voted for because he had a plan and he was going to have some constraint. And here it is. They don't seem interested in producing a plan. Again, the same group of people with a new leader, and it remains to be seen if he's going to table that budget. But
I mean, all you have to do as well is imagine the election had gone slightly differently and Poilievre had won, and then said, "No budget, I'm not going to do it." I mean, the sky would fall in, wouldn't it? There would be hysteria. There'd be people in the streets of Ottawa running around naked, setting fire to things. They would be in a panic about it, wouldn't they? But if His Majesty, the Royal Mark Carney, does that, then, oh, well, he must have a reason, because it's Mark Carney. He's God, isn't he?
Yeah, but they are interested in this one. They are interested. They're going to take a third swing on the censorship bill. And the Liberals appointee, Senator Chris Wells of Alberta, yesterday said that a group of interested senators would like to see a third attempt at regulating the internet. The Prime Minister has favored censorship, what he calls pollution that's online. Bill C-63 lapsed in the Commons last January 6th. A similar 2021 measure, Bill C-36, lapsed last year's election. Bill 63 did not come to a vote in the other place, and in the dying days of the last part of the government signal, it would be prioritizing other aspects of the bill. And this is Stephen Guilbeault, too. There's been several interviews with him, too, right? And he says, I believe, Senator Wells says, I believe Canada must get tougher on hate and send a clear message, an unequivocal message that hate and extremism will never be tolerated in this country, no matter who it targets. And Carney said on April 10th campaign speech in Hamilton, he favored a third attempt at internet censorship. He said, we need the online hate. We don't need the online hate for the United States. And he can take the conspiracy theories and all that, but the more serious thing is when it affects how people behave in our society, when Canadians are threatened going to their community centers and other places of worship, their school, or God forbid, when it affects our children. My government, if we are reelected, will be taking action.
Again, no, it's like, it's other people that do this, isn't it? It's not the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party's never been guilty of any of this. Even
or the CBC.
Talking about schools, there have been a number of shootings aimed at intimidating Jews at schools in Canada, where they shoot the entrance of a school. I mean, is it possible that the Liberal Party maybe contributed something to that? Maybe Mark Carney did when he agreed with some lunatic that said that there was a genocide in Gaza. Is that hatred? Is he putting children at risk? Will the Liberal Party look at themselves? Will the Liberal Party, would they recognise the language used by that NDP MP the other week as hatred, where she referred to everybody that's not First Nations in Canada or in BC as being colonizers and uninvited guests? That sounds a lot like ethnic hatred to me. That sounds like racist hatred. But the point I'm trying to make here is that's an entirely subjective thing to say. Hatred is subjective. It's a subjective term. There is no, you can't get a blackboard out and come up with a sort of mathematical formula that tells you what is and is not hatred, which is why this is extraordinarily stupid and dangerous. Because what you're in effect doing is giving a set of ideologues and partisans permission to decide what is and is not hatred and imprison people based on that opinion that they have. If you allow this to happen in your society, you deserve everything that you get. You deserve to be thrown in jail for an innocuous tweet, because the line must be drawn here, and this can't possibly be allowed to pass.
And this is interesting because we talked about this yesterday. New Conservative MP, the doctor, Matt Strauss, called COVID mandates in Canada full communism in his maiden speech. I've heard feedback from lots of people that said it brought them to tears listening to that speech. And he says he refuses to be a cog in their broken machine. But how many outlets have picked up that story? Because that's huge. How many outlets have actually discussed this? This Toronto Sun picked it up, right? But how many other people are going to pick it up? Will CBC pick this story up? Because it's big, right?
Yeah, it's quite an accusation, considering his background, because he is a doctor, isn't he?
He is a doctor, yeah?
Yeah. I'm surprised they haven't even done it to try and discredit the Conservatives, because there would be a way to do this, where they say, like, Conservative MP says it was full communism. Experts disagree. They might do that still next week or something.
They probably don't want to touch it because his speech was rather filled with lots of things that you'd be tough to argue against. So they're just rather just ignore it and let it die. But it'd be interesting to see. So all you people out there that watch the mainstreams, CTV and CBC, see if you see this story come up and see how they frame it.
Speaking of the Toronto Sun, though, you missed a bit earlier on up there. Brian Lilly saying that he reckons that there's a deal coming.
Yeah. No, I thought we talked about it. We did.
Did we?
Yeah, we did.
Because that's quite. I mean, it's based off nothing. He just went to a speech from the U.S. ambassador to Canada, and he spoke to some people off the record.
Yeah. It's
all a bit like, vague, but still, the prospect of a deal in the next sort of 48 hours or something, or 72 hours, I think that's what it said.
Yeah.
That would be a game changer. And that would certainly explain, wouldn't it, why Mark Carney has gone elbows down. He's gone arms out, hasn't he, for a hug. So we'll have to wait and see what happens to that one.
Well, a deal would be great for Canada. Sean Fraser.
That would be a shot in the arm for everybody, really, wouldn't it? And certainly for the economy.
Sean Fraser apologizes for saying First Nations don't have a blanket veto power over projects. I was wondering when I listened to him say those words. But so now Justice Minister Sean Fraser has apologized for saying the UN Declaration on Rights of Indigenous Peoples does not amount to a blanket veto power over projects. Fraser said his comments have damaged the very precarious trust Ottawa has built with First Nations.
Such a bizarre scandal. It tells you a lot about where the power lies in this country, I think. Very, very revealing. Because it was a completely innocuous thing that he said. Totally just...
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, this is a subject that it really, every single atom of irrationality in the Canadian body politic is activated when this subject is discussed, and there's another example of it.
You know where they need to focus some of their energy? I've got a picture here from Manitoba here near Flin Flon. Look at this. This is from X here. You got the Northern Lights, and below it you got the wildfires that are burning in that area there. And then we got a chart here from the Manitoba, a fire situation report from the government of Manitoba. And it shows you, if you go through that chart there, natural caused fires, total fires burning are 111. Then near the bottom, the second square at the bottom there, that's the fires burning right now, or 111 fires so far. Natural caused, 6. 100 of them are human caused. And it's just there's a lot of this going on, and in some of it is like accidentally caused, but 100 human caused fires would lead someone to suspect that a lot of that is arson.
Yeah, or just like absolute stupidity and negligence as well.
Yeah. And then and there's this from Rebel News. 90% of Manitoba, Saskatchewan wildfires are human caused, says government data. So, I mean, definitely a lot more needs to happen and stop this. Because you know what, the first thing they're doing, they're jumping to the podium and talking about climate change causing all these fires when the people are causing these fires. Maybe they're trying to push an agenda or what have you. But here's a satellite map of some of the fires here. Just look at a little clip here to play from that. I can show you the fires burning from the satellite map. This is why you're getting all the smoke, because you just watch that, the way it cycles here, right into Ontario.
Yeah. Damn them.
And then we're going to bring up our just the state of media and the Online News Act, and we're going to just keep beating this drum until they let go of Bill C-18, as they actually try to add another bill to suppress more freedom of speech. So, but Bill C-18 definitely hampering news outlets from the ability to get to audience that they've earned by serving community. It's been almost
we saw
years.
earlier as well, just another example of the Liberal Party's hypocrisy and the hypocrisy of Mark Carney, their treasured leader. He's talking about the US. He's talking about we don't need all this poison coming over the border from the US and all the rest of it. How does he then explain spending millions of dollars on Facebook, which is the largest social media company in the world?
Yeah.
How does he explain? I mean, how are those two things in accord with one another? Facebook is supposedly like the world capital of misinformation and hatred and all the rest of it, but then Mark Carney is spending very, very good money to get his message on there. Why does he want his message there? Why does he want to give money to these hate mongers in his the way he frames it? Is there any explanation for that?
And then why wouldn't they repeal Bill C-18, which even the Liberal MP here in our area here says it's failed? Repeal it and allow news outlets to put their information back on Facebook and Meta, and take up some of the space being taken up by people that steal our content and definitely have one type of narrative to push. And then that's what's given them the space to kind of grow these accounts and not allow news outlets, including CBC and CTV and Global and the rest of them, put their content on social media.
And we've still not had an explanation. We've not even been treated with that much respect, which is not much respect at all, is it? I mean,
no.
You would expect your executioner to give you a bit more of an explanation than and in fact, you would get more of an explanation from your executioner, wouldn't you, than the Liberal government? They just don't want to talk about this. They don't want to provide any information, any explanation, nothing, just pure silence as this stink just continues to worsen, and it just consumes the whole of Canadian, media and intellectual and political society. It's absolutely vile, and there's no way to defend it. And this is, talk about crisis in the media. It's a vicious circle, because they're not held to account on this because the media is so crap in Canada, and the media is so crap in Canada because the government has put this stupid bill on the statute books. So it's just like this poisonous cycle, and on it goes. Close
to 100 outlets have failed since the introduction of Bill C-18, which is coming up now to a 2-year anniversary, and had no sign of reprieve. And I've seen some of the letters from some of the reporters here locally, sending them to MP Stephen Fuhr and that, asking that their careers are going to end because of this bill, and yet that many recognize that it's just ludicrous, and yet it continues. And all we're going to have left here is CBC, and that, you know, continue to get money from you, the taxpayer. And I don't know what to say. We got some examples here of, even in the United States, of a year-old countries there, BBC, Caroline Levitt taking some questions from BBC.
Firing on Palestinians trying to get aid from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Up to 20 people, according to the Red Cross, have arrived to the hospital that they've set up with gunshot wounds, have died from them. Is this administration aware of these? And I mean, what is being done to address this situation?
The administration is aware of those reports, and we are currently looking into the veracity of them, because unfortunately, unlike some in the media, we don't take the word of Hamas with total truth. We like to look into it when they speak. Unlike the BBC, who had multiple headlines. They wrote, Israeli tank kills 26, Israeli tank kills 21, Israeli gunfire kills 31, Red Cross says 21 people were killed in an aid incident, and then, oh wait, they had to correct and take down their entire story, saying we reviewed the footage and couldn't find any evidence of anything. Oh. Okay, so we're going to look into reports before we confirm them from this podium or before we take action, and I suggest that journalists who actually care about truth do the same to reduce the amount of misinformation that's going around the globe on this front.
I mean, for once, I can applaud her. Usually I find her to be insufferable and like nails on a chalkboard, but she's completely right there to point out that the illustrious, glorious BBC is hopelessly stupid and worthless on this particular issue, Israel-Palestine, and many other issues, really. But this story in particular, there have been reports into the BBC, commissioned by the BBC, that show that they have a terrible problem with bias against Israel. There's even one report from about 20 years ago that has never been released because it's thought to be so damning and so destructive and corrosive of the BBC's reputation that they won't even release it. But the BBC also, at the beginning of this war, I remember, because I have BBC News on my phone and I get all of their alerts. They sent out an alert saying, in very dramatic language, that the IDF, the Israeli military, had just destroyed a hospital or something like that with a rocket. And I was like, oh, bloody hell, this is an absolute catastrophe. And I'm like looking through it, and they're talking about it. Turns out, within a couple of hours, they learned that it was actually Hamas that did it. It was a misfired rocket, and they'd blown up their own. Well, I say their own. They'd blown up a hospital in Gaza, which they rule. But Israel is just, the BBC is just not interested in a neutral perspective on this. The BBC and everybody that works for the BBC, just about the majority of the people that work for the BBC, have already decided that Israel is some kind of like racist, genocidal, psychopathic regime, and that the Palestinians are all just like hopeless and helpless and being destroyed. And Hamas is just like, they're just trying to defend Palestine kind of thing. There's no attempt to try and actually understand this situation from the BBC, I find. And even now, like they get their old wizards to come out with Zimmer frames at this point, like Jeremy Bowen, who's supposed to have gravitas, and he's just a complete partisan. He just despises Israel, and it's quite obvious, So the BBC, at the very least, they can get their facts right, can't they? But they don't, because that's what bias can do to you as a journalist. It can make your standards collapse, and you just make mistakes again and again and again.
Well, let's listen to this clip from the CBC and see how they fare.
And I wonder if, besides the budget, there's any political parties who are interested about legislative work, which is supposed to be what MPs do, because at this point, it hasn't been on the political radar since the election.
To your point, I counted, they passed 3 bills between last summer and now.
Right.
So
Wow.
in about a year, we've passed 3 government bills.
Well,
and that is
I
all.
know that it's our job to report the news, but at some point, I think we need to report
more scrutiny
does
of
not
that.
Happen.
Yeah.
And the non-news.
And one of them was about Jasper
is
National Park,
gigantic.
which was important work, but like it's not like not necessarily one of the three was not an onerous piece of legislation.
3 bills. That's what Parliament's been doing. And then they're going to take all these breaks because they're hardly going to sit this year, right? Like there's very few little time that they're going to sit. So 3 bills.
But this is like, you know, that's why Polyev, who's much more in tune with the kind of political, he's much more in tune, I think, with how politicians look to the people. So he was saying if he's elected, like the summer vacation is cancelled, because I think he recognizes that the people are upset. But Khan Dog, he's just not bothered, is he? But like I've said, I think Mark Carney he's done that on purpose because he wants to govern like an executive. He doesn't want to govern like a prime minister with all that fuss and all that messiness and all the sort of people with their stupid opinions as he sees it, you know, all these stupid lesser people trying to say things that he doesn't want to hear. He wants to govern like a chief executive. So for him, I think like the less parliament, the better. So that's probably why that's happening.
So one of the key things that I got out of that was the reporter questioning herself that, perhaps we need to offer more scrutiny to the government. Isn't that what you're supposed to do?
Yeah, the fella said that, didn't he? Yeah.
Isn't that what that is supposed to be the job? Because you're the one that gets to stand in front of them all the time. Because they don't allow access. Like we're going to talk about that in the next little bit here. So the CBC and the CTV. I mean, there's Vasi Kapelis is great, but other than that, how many offer actual real scrutiny? Because you're not getting it from Rosemary Barton. She's basically cheerleading the Liberal Party.
Well, watch the interview. The only real serious interview that Mark Carney sat down for. Oh, he did actually do the Vasi Kapelis one, didn't he? Other than that, the only other big interview that he sat down for since being elected is with David Cochrane, wasn't it? I would advise people to watch that. If like, however low your opinion is of the CBC, watch that, and I trust me, it will be lower than it already is. Because that was like a couple of chums, wasn't it? Like it was like a celebration of Mark Carney's election.
And then compared to the one from the UK reporter. And
yeah, because in British journalism,
yeah.
Well, in British journalism, it is like, you know, you get it from being a kid just watching the news, but certainly when you train as a journalist and when you work as a journalist in England, you cannot be deferent to people in power. It has to be the opposite of deference. You have to almost be contemptuous, and you've got to set yourself up like a sort of Victorian invigilator of an exam or something like that. You've got to set yourself up as to sort of scrutinize everything that they say, everything that they've done, and really put pressure on them and not believe anything that they say, even in the interview. That's the attitude in England. And as you can see, the result of that is that British journalists tend to be a lot better than Canadian journalists who are inclined, like Cochrane, just to sort of have a giggle with the Prime Minister, who's already a very controversial figure. And he's in a lot of trouble with a lot of people already. But Cochrane's there talking to him as if he's like an athlete or something that's just won a gold medal.
Yeah, it looked like a podcast between two chums, you know, like one of those where they're just like kind of like, you know, getting along to get along.
Like Joe Rogan, to be honest, Joe Rogan gets all this criticism, doesn't he? Because Joe Rogan tends to say things like, oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Like a controversial figure will say something controversial and Joe Rogan will say something like, yeah, okay, fair enough. And then there's Cochrane. He's supposed to be like the anti-Rogan. He's supposed to be a professional journalist. And he was there doing that as well, isn't he? He's like, yeah, fair enough, Prime Minister. It's like, come on.
Like, and we're both busy. You know, you're busy. I'm sure you don't want any more questions. So just like, you try to get every ounce. Like, you know, when I had David Eby, like we milked that. And then, you know, probably to our detriment there because we probably want to get another one. But, you know, if you have them, then you just go at them. And you and I sat down with Renee Merrifield yesterday, former MLA, Beyond the Bell. We're going to play a small clip on media here. We'll probably cut it off. I think I have like almost 4 minutes here, but we'll probably cut it off sooner than that. But let's play a clip. You can find this on Kelowna Now, and you can find it on our YouTube channel and Now Media Group. Let's play a small clip, though, talking about media.
In the fridge.
So they get to hide all this, and I'm going to go back to the media. They get to hide all this because, one, they say to us, like media outlets like us, you can't have an interview. You can possibly do a streeter, and then if you do a streeter, I've seen it happen. If you try to get them on the street, they say, "Oh no, book an interview with my office. I'm not taking a streeter." Or CBC will then say, "Oh, look at those reporters chasing people down the street. Those aren't real journalists." And so you're just caught in this vicious loop. Like they won't answer questions. Like if you look at Stephen Guilbeault, when he basically runs from the press. And say what you want about the United States. Like they do more like right now, they do more in front of the camera than I've ever seen. Like they'll take interviews all the time. And how do you have accountability? If you look at Parliament, they don't even want to sit Parliament. You and I have talked about this, Renee. Like look at the parliamentary calendar. So that's question period. So you only get, there's very little question period. And then you won't be held accountable by the press. You won't even respond to Iain. Iain worked for the Daily Mail. He's got credentials coming out of his wazoo, but he doesn't have CBC beside his name, and we're not state-funded media, so they don't even respond. Yet, Kelowna Now can send an email to the State Department and get a response within an hour.
And you know what? Isn't that a story? Like, couldn't you actually do a, here's what we've tried. Here are the FOIs that we've done. Here's the streeter that we were told to call the office. So we called the office, and this is what we were told. And you could literally do the whole story on the erosion of accountability.
Yeah. Do you know what? Somebody who does that all the time, Holly Dona Blacklocks, that's what she does. She does FOIs all day long. That's how they build their business. You know what she gets called? Yellow journalism.
Yeah, well, there is a bit of a sort of rule, an informal rule, and you learn that it's real when you break it, which is that you don't pull back the curtain and show everybody how it works. So you don't talk.
Yeah, I advise everybody to go watch that because Iain had a really good explanation, and in a matter of time, time here, we're not going to play that whole thing, but Iain had a really good explanation of all the stuff we've gone through. So get your curiosity, go watch that, and a lot more. We talked about a lot of things in that discussion there, and I'd advise people to go watch it. We're going to move on to Polyev, the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square. Do you remember that? I imagine when there was peaceful protesters there, and they rolled the tanks in, and
I mean that's one of the most significant events of the last sort of 50 years or something like that. I would say it's a little bit underplayed in the West nowadays. But it wasn't back then. When it actually happened, everybody was very concerned about it. I mean, there are estimates that tens of thousands of people were killed. Nobody really knows because the Communist Party is just, they're unapologetic and they've also just hidden it away. They don't want to talk about it. Because this was during the rule of Deng Xiaoping, or Deng Xiaoping, I think is how it's pronounced. If you know him, he's the guy that kind of liberalized the Chinese economy a little bit after Mao's craziness. But still, when it came to the idea of like personal liberty, he wasn't going to entertain that. Nobody in the Communist Party was willing to entertain that, and they came down with a sledgehammer. And nothing's really changed in China. They don't have any more. Yeah. They don't have any more personal freedoms or anything like that. But the thing I find interesting about this, anyway, just to make this news rather than just a historical conversation, is that Pierre Poilievre has come out and said that, and he's talked about the Chinese Communist Party by name murdering its own people, indiscriminately killing people, all the rest of it. Very strong, clear language from Pierre Poilievre, and I just wanted to highlight that because what do you think? Do you want to go on Polymarket, see if you can cast a bet whether Mark Carney and the Liberal Party will issue a similar statement? Because I bet you they don't.
Yeah, the other thing that I would say there is like this: the Chinese government refuses to be held accountable for this absolute tragedy that happened. And the same thing you and I talked about yesterday: the Liberal government, being in power, will not be held accountable for what they did to Canadians in the trucker rally there in Ottawa, and bringing out those horses and trampling on people. I mean, it doesn't even compare to what happened in Tiananmen Square, but it's still a violation of rights in protest here in Canada. And there will be no accountability here for that. The Emergencies Act, which according to reports, Mark Carney was actually helpful in saying that they needed to use the Emergencies Act against these protesters in Canada.
But also a lot of people's livelihoods and lives that were destroyed during the COVID era restrictions. You know, people that weren't able to say their farewells to family members and things like that. That's it. Obviously, it's nothing. It doesn't come close to Tiananmen Square, which was like a catastrophe of a magnitude that we can't even understand. I don't think you'd have to go back to the Second World War, I think, to try and grasp that as a Westerner. But yeah, the COVID situation, and there's other stuff, and I think what we talked about this earlier in the week, didn't we? You need regime change. I know that's quite a dramatic sort of way to describe it, but you need the establishment to be replaced by a new establishment, you know. So in other words, in Canada, that means the Liberals need to lose an election. And then I think this sort of stuff can be revisited. But at the moment, you know, it's still the same people in power. And obviously that applies to China as well. As long as you maintain power to a certain extent, you can determine
you can write history.
You can determine exactly. Yeah,
write history.
Although that's a bit harder in Canada, to be fair. But there's still truth to that. You can still sit on things, and you know, just like the what they call the green slush fund, all that. You can just sit on it. You can just squat on things like that. And just, you know, don't let anybody near it. Like, there are certain privileges that you have in the Canadian system. And obviously, when you have the media under your influence to some extent, as the Liberal Party does, then that gives you a massive amount of added power. So, yeah, I mean, let's wait and see. I'd say when and if there's a new government in Canada, like a non-Liberal government, things like that will be discussed more. But that would be what you mentioned is definitely the most controversial, isn't it? I'd say the Emergencies Act.
Jews in the U.S. fearing for safety after terror incidents, and then increasingly Jews are afraid of their safety in the wake of the attacks linked to the Israel-Hamas conflict. And Haley Sophia, the CEO of the Jewish Democratic Council of America, said recent terror incidents in Washington and Boulder could have happened to anyone, and it's definitely, yeah.
It's been true for ages, but it's gone into hyperdrive now, hasn't it? And like I say, and I've said many times, the people that insist that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza, you know, just think about what you're saying. Because there are people, like I've said many times, there are many, many people out there who are stupid enough to believe a lie like that. And you know what, they will act on it.
David, you know David Portnoy with Barstool Sports. He's a pizza guy. He goes around and he tries pizza out everywhere. He was actually in Toronto.
Yeah, he was in Toronto, wasn't he?
He does that one slice, one bite or whatever, and then he gives you a score, and like a 7.5 is actually a pretty good score. So he's there taking a bite of the pizza in front of some, you know, family-run pizzeria joint, and a car drives by, and then somebody screamed an obscenity about the Jews, and then a bunch of young kids that were filming Dave there started laughing, and he actually took offense to that, and he says, "What are you laughing at?" And you know, then they're just like, "Oh," like, you know what I mean? Like, people need to take that serious, and it's you know.
Well, that's the TikTok generation, isn't it? The younger people, and this is one of the reasons that the Americans were so upset about TikTok and TikTok's algorithms, because they were saying that it sort of it pushed like anti-Semitism and anti-Israel videos to the fore. And obviously, public attitude surveys and all the rest of it show that the young people in America and in the West in general are not big fans of Israel. And it doesn't take much for people to go from despising Israel to despising Jews. You know, that's a very well-trodden path that many people have taken over the years. And there's obviously a link between those two things. So I don't know. I mean, the American idea for TikTok seems to have just gone. Like, they were going to buy it, weren't they? But that just seems to have just been forgotten about. But I mean, it's beyond TikTok anyway. It's not exactly like it's just TikTok's fault.
EB says no to pipeline. We're going to do some of the British Columbia news. EB says no to the pipeline. He says he won't be throwing his support behind a new oil pipeline through the province, dismissing Doug Ford's suggestion that EB change his mind. EB said in response to Ford's remarks that the publicly owned TMX pipeline is already running through BC, and the province doesn't support lifting the ban on oil tankers in BC's northern coast. He says it's not his job to tell Ford it's extremely unlikely that there will be a tunnel under Toronto's 401, or tell Alberta Danielle Smith her vision for a pipeline connecting Alberta and northern BC many, many years off with no proponent in sight. EB said his job is to protect the interests of British Columbia by bringing forward shovel-ready projects. I don't know what's shovel-ready here, though. So he was speaking there, and he was in Osaka, Japan, on a 10-day trade mission in Asia.
Where, you know, Japan being one of those countries that came to beg for natural gas, liquefied natural gas that Trudeau said no to, which, you know, obviously needs to be transported through pipeline. You can't carry that on trucks or whatever. That's a pipeline's job. Wow. But EB, I don't know what it is with EB. I mean, he's basically relying on the Greens as the NDP usually is in BC. That seems to be becoming almost like a formal arrangement now. And I think he's probably just trying to shore up his support with the Greens, especially as he tries to get his that new bill through.
And this is and this is the message that I've been saying forever. You know, David Eby put out a tweet: BC has what the world needs, including critical minerals that are building blocks for the many products BC can meet the global demand for these resources. And by promoting industries and getting investments, we support more family supporting jobs in our province. And then this Mortimer guy on there says what BC needs doesn't have is a business climate where the private sector wants to invest to make products for the global markets, because it's anti-business. And even Eby said that himself. Remember when he took back that $1,000 that he promised in the election? He said, here's $1,000 for everybody to help with groceries. And he took it back. He says, well, we can't give out that $1,000 because of the value of the Canadian dollar, Trump tariffs, and nobody wants to invest in BC. The question is why?
To be honest, he's reneged on quite a few things, because I can still vividly remember his panic for a couple of months before the election. And he was panicking, no doubt about it. He was in full panic mode.
He even talked to us, he was panicking so much.
Exactly, that tells you everything you need to know. But I don't know, they might consider that a bit of a win, because they nearly won Kelowna, didn't they? But yeah, they were in full maximum panic mode, and they were going back on all sorts of things, making all kinds of promises. Eby basically became a centrist, or centre-right even, you could say, because he knew he needed to do that to win. And then he won, and now he's kind of unwinding on a lot of that. And I mean, the $1,000 thing, the check, that's obviously like really like in your face, isn't it? That's an in your face betrayal. That is just like, doesn't need any explanation. It's just an obvious betrayal. But it's beyond that, isn't it? It's on things like mental health, and then obviously projects like infrastructure. What is wrong? Why has it become now a taboo? And it is a taboo. In the true meaning of that word, that sociological, anthropological definition of that word, it is now taboo on the left and centre left in Canada to even say the words oil and gas. They don't even say it. It's almost like a cursed word. It's like, you know, it's like a witch's word. So now he's going on about critical minerals and things. And this is what you keep hearing, isn't it? And it just makes me cringe. I mean, can you imagine? I know we've said this a lot of times. Can you imagine a country like Russia or Qatar or something like that being like so reluctant to exploit their own like gifts from the Lord that they have under the ground? It's so crackers. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, they talk about they want to focus on shovel-ready projects, which are what? And then also you should have a multi-prong kind of approach. You should have stuff that is shovel-ready, the stuff that takes time. Like you need to kind of fill the pipeline of projects, to coin a word, and also build a pipeline. But they're not doing that. And also the biggest thing they're not doing is convincing people with money to invest in British Columbia. Even if you look at the Airbnb policy here, look at what's happening in Kelowna. The cranes are coming down, and they're not going back up. Because who's investing in Kelowna and buying another property so that they can do something with it when the government changed the rules? They have stymied business, stymied investment, and they do it more and more and more. And this thing from Eby, he should say, well, you know, I'd look at it at least, but he doesn't want to say it, right? Anyway.
This is because that's what ideology does.
Yeah.
And that's why, ideology can make you do things like that. It can make you shoot yourself in the chest and think that it's a good thing to do, and a necessary thing to do. And that's why Carney kept trying to talk about himself as a pragmatist. And yet, we still haven't seen evidence of that.
I interviewed Gavin Dew yesterday, MLA for Kelowna Mission, and in regard to the pediatric crisis here in Kelowna. We're going to play a small clip of it, and then you can go watch the full thing on our YouTube channel, and it'll be up on a story, I imagine, today at some point.
That's an input. That's not an output. So there just does seem to be this constant politicization of the numbers. And I would add to that, Jim, especially from having talked to a number of doctors in the last few days who are right at the front lines of this, it seems as if the government is determined to replace doctors that are here in our community and in our system rather than retain those doctors. So there has been seemingly just this broken culture, a lack of listening, a lack of hearing, a lack of effort into retention. So you've got a very frustrated cohort of doctors. In the case of pediatrics, we've got 20 pediatricians in Kelowna that are declining to work at KGH because of the working conditions and the risks that they feel they face there. So even if
So you can go watch that full interview there on our YouTube channel, and it'll be on Kelowna Now as a story today. It was very good. And that was that. It all started with that young doctor on TikTok came out and started talking about the pediatric crisis here at KGH. And I thought, oh boy, she's going to get in trouble. And then all of a sudden, this letter came from 7 doctors, and then it was followed up with support from another 130. So it's very hard for IH to ignore it, Interior Health, and now they sent out a statement. Again, they got so many people in communications there, but they won't speak to us. We've reached out many times. And Josie Osborne, where is she on this? I don't know. Eleanor Sturko put out a tweet there too. This is how the Vancouver Sun did a piece on it. BC health officials were warned of the problems 9 months ago before Kelowna Hospital pediatric ward closure. So this has been an ongoing issue, and we talked about it with Gavin Dew there, about all the ongoing health crisis in British Columbia with, we've done so many stories on ER closures in Lillooet, Oliver, 100 Mile House, Merritt, all these ones that are, the people are told to, travel a couple 100 miles or 2 hours to go to hospitals over mountain passes during the wintertime. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
Dreadful. Yeah. And, it is interesting to see the opposition focus on this, because we discussed yesterday, I think this is huge, isn't it? And this all taps into people's feeling that the living standards are on the decline, because there's no more dramatic an example of falling living standards than this kind of thing, where you have to fear for your pregnant wife or relative or whatever, because she might go to the hospital and there won't be any doctors to help her give birth, or that's just that should not happen in Canada, should it? That's just that there has to be a massive rejection of that becoming normalized.
And then some people say, well, they end up going to Vancouver or something like that. But you think about the emotional and the economic stress that puts on a family if you happen to have your young one that has to go to the hospital. And now you can't have the support network around that person when they're in hospital, because they now have to travel, and maybe only one person in the family can go and stay with them, and then they have to more economic costs because they have to pay for hotel rooms and all that kind of stuff. And Kelowna is not a small town. This is one that the NDP are not going to be able to ignore, because Kelowna is a major center. That's the second biggest center in the province. And here we have a pediatric ward closing. And all the closures, the small ones, they kind of got away with it. Say, people that no doctors want to live in small towns, and they've ignored it. And they say they're spending money and recruiting doctors from the United States and nurses, and what have they got to show for it? They tried that recruitment there in the UK. We've asked for information. How much did you spend in the UK, and how many doctors did we get? They won't release that information, so they don't have the data. And then we did an FOI over a month ago and still don't have the information. That's part of the other stuff that we talked with Renee The governments refuse to be held accountable, and that's not a great place for a strong democracy and a strong government. Shameful.
No, power to the media.
Shameful. We're going to move on to markets. And in our market report here, Canada faces a productivity crisis. We'll get to that, but the markets are relatively flat still, like trying to digest this Trump on or tariff on, Trump on, whatever, like Trump's and Trump, tariff. But the markets are relatively flat because they're looking for direction. And gold as well. Gold's hanging on to that 3,300 mark, though. Gold is hanging on to that 3,300 mark. And all the geopolitical stuff that's still going on in the world. I mean, it's not calming down for sure. Like, I mean, the Ukraine war, there looked to be some glimmers of hope, but then it seems to have escalated lately. The Hamas thing, you thought, and the Israeli thing, you thought that was kind of simmering down, and that seems to be getting worse. I don't know. Things seem to be getting worse. Maybe they get worse before they get better. I don't know. But definitely holding gold at that mark. And Bitcoin looking like it's hanging on to that $100,000 mark. And we did that. We played that clip there from the analyst Tom Lee yesterday saying that it's going to $3.5 million bucks. So there you go. For all you people that are Bitcoin lovers, and the Canadian dollar, again, just kind of treading water as well. Not much reaction at all right now. And then on to crude, the word that nobody wants to talk about. No, not nobody. A lot of people on the left don't want to talk about oil here in Canada. But you look at the discount that we sell our year's WTI, West Texas Intermediate at 63.42, and you go down to the middle there, Western Canadian Select selling at a discount as usual, $51. There you go. Why? Because we don't have anywhere else we can sell it to. That's the discount. And then this is the chart here when we talked about the productivity emergency facing Bank of Canada. And this is that chart that we've shown many, many times. We can put that full screen. That chart shows the productivity gap here between the Canada and the U.S. And that's a lot has to do with our immigration, though, too, right? So we got lower output per worker here in Canada.
But if you look at the red line there, and you look at where it collapses and where it diverges from the U.S., something happened there, didn't it? In that year, I seem to remember 2015. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you can remember, but something big happened in 2015.
Yeah, that's when we started saying no to everything. And Chrystia Freeland, friend of the show, friend of the show, said it herself when she was running for the prime minister's job. Maybe we've been better off with Chrystia Freeland. Chrystia Freeland said that the Liberals spent the last 10 years wasted the last 10 years on identity politics and virtue signaling. And there's the chart that shows you that. Good job, Chrystia Freeland, for at least pointing that out and admitting to that.
That's one of many, many charts, isn't it? Like GDP per capita is the other one. The one that's doing the rounds lately is immigration. That started to like splash out into American and British and German and whatnot, sort of like intellectual circles. And they're looking at the COVID era immigration in Canada, and they're just like, what the hell happened to Canada? Because it's like there's almost like there's no space on a normal chart to even include how high it went during the bonanza year of, like, I think it was 2022, wasn't it?
And then we're going to move on to our technology section here. We're getting rid of our intros here. We're going to add them back after. But AI in healthcare is the lead here in the technology section. And the researchers are using AI to improve cancer care. And maybe that we'll have to rely on AI because it's like getting harder and harder to get healthcare in Canada. Yeah. And AI could improve how cancer is diagnosed and treated. The first tool, MISC, uses AI to scan digital images of tumor tissue and pinpoint areas likely to respond to immunotherapy, something older methods often miss. It tells doctor how confident it is in each prediction. The second tool creates 3D images of the tissues. So, there's some hope there that we can get some better uses for AI in healthcare and maybe get more patient care. And this one's troubling. This is from your old friend here. We're going to play a clip.
Platforms are being misused to subvert science and spread disinformation and hate to billions of people. This clear and present global threat demands clear and coordinated global action. Our policy brief on information integrity on digital platforms puts forward a framework for a concerned international response.
There you go. He's got that nice pamphlet and everything. He created a nice pamphlet, so it's got to be true, right?
He is one of the worst secretaries general, I suppose is the plural, in the history of the United Nations. He is an absolute joke of a person. I cannot believe that they thought it was a good idea to put him in power. He's such a fool.
They played right into Mark Carney's hand there, you know? So he's going to say, well, they said we got to do it, so there you go.
The UN says.
You and I talk about King Arthur a lot, and then this guy's actually gone back with AI and he started interviewing people throughout history with AI. It's kind of like a cool use of AI.
You right now?
Woke up, stepped in dung, got taxed, and that was before breakfast.
Do you enjoy your work?
Oh yeah, it's honest work, and no one talks back.
What do you think of King Henry?
Oh, well, he's very committed to marrying.
How's the health situation looking?
Well, everyone I saw yesterday is dead today. So,
how do you respond to the witch accusations?
If I were a witch, you'd already be a frog.
What's the biggest challenge for a noblewoman these days?
3 hours to get dressed, and still no pockets.
How's business?
Flour shortage, the oven is cursed, and rats. Lots of rats. What's life like for a farmer right now? Hard work, sore back, but the soil's good this year. Might even...
Rats. Sounds like he's talking to somebody in this century here. Rats. Except they all live in Parliament, maybe.
Cheeky.
Rats. More rats and more rats. And then we didn't get to this yesterday, but we got a few things to get through here in the Are You Serious section. And it is elitist dancing the new cake? Is that in our Are You Serious section? Elitist dancing. Is this the new Let Them Eat Cake? But first we have an image that we wanted to share. Well, we have an image that sent to us by Roman Bartos there. Look at that beautiful image of the Okanagan with northern lights. And then the first one here, like we got the dance. Not on the screen there. Oh, we got a lot of music. Maybe kill the sound though too and just play the dance. So maybe it sounds better without the music. Let's play that dance. You can play your own music to this dance.
Looks like Fred Durst, if you remember that character, Limp Bizkit.
I don't know what symbol that Mark Carney is giving out there with the 2 L's. Is that loser, or what is he doing with
Double
that?
loser, maybe, yeah.
A double loser, is that like, I don't know. I don't even know who it just like giving her though. And then the next one here, we actually played a picture of him dancing just recently, so it's all about dancing. The politicians are just giving her in the dance floor, but poor Jack Meaty's been missing. I don't know. Is anybody looking for him? And then
he doesn't have to care anymore, does he? I think that's probably his view of it.
And then we talked about this yesterday too. This is a steak in Canada is like about $50, and the same steak in the U.S. is $14 in U.S. dollars though. But what in translating that might be $50 in Canadian dollars as well. So
soon maybe.
And then this one here. Are you serious? Argentina's economy grew by 8% year over year. Maybe Melanie Jolie can tweet this one out because you know they made up their numbers there.
They're still having a bit of trouble there in Argentina, but by and large, I think he's quite happy, isn't he? He's feeling quite vindicated because that's what he promised to do.
Yeah, and that's he's doing the hand signal that Cory Booker did recently. We're going to get to Cory Booker in a second. And then this one here, somebody put this out. The average Canadian recipient on pension gets $1,200 a month after working for 50 years. And the average refugee gets $3,874 after being in Canada for 1 day. So we talked about this yesterday. I think it got cut off. Is like you're probably better off to leave Canada, renounce your citizenship, and then sneak back across the border instead of trying to collect your pension.
I don't know. I think we should say I certainly don't know if those numbers are accurate. They don't look accurate to me, but there are certainly perks in place for people that are granted asylum in Canada. Yeah, and they are quite generous.
And this is their "Are you serious?" section, so we're not exactly fact checking.
It's not even serious.
And then Cory Booker announces plan to occupy the Rhineland, and then there you go, Cory Booker. I guess he joined the Elon Musk club, but he didn't get the same type of treatment though. So I think he's complaining that after what he did, he's not getting the press that Elon Musk got.
Yeah, maybe that's what he wanted, a bit of attention.
Poor Cory Booker. And then Rupa had this to say, because CTV put out this tweet, nearly 40% of the world's glaciers are already doomed, experts say. And she said, uh-oh, we're all about to die again. There you go.
It does feel like that sometimes, doesn't it? With that sort of news. But speaking of climate change doomerism, Greta Thunberg, who's now full-time anti-Semite, she's on a boat right now, isn't she, on the way to Gaza?
Screaming for help. Yeah, screaming for help. Did you see that? Distress call.
Yeah, because of the drones or something.
Greta Thunberg.
Greta Thunberg, indeed.
Greta Thunberg. Who was that? Mark Carney? Is that what did he say about her? That he idolizes her. Maybe I got that wrong.
Something like he wishes. No, what did he say? Something like he's the Greta Thunberg in office or something, while she's the activist.
I don't know. And Daniel Smith is likely to get the message here from David Eby. Like that blows me away that David Eby would say that. You know, and here's the thing. It says they want to get rid of the internal trade barriers. Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, PEI sign a deal. Where's British Columbia? Where's Manitoba, for that matter? Do you know what I mean? Like, where are they?
Manitoba, I think, is involved, actually.
Is they involved?
I think they are involved. Yeah.
So where's BC in on it? They're focusing on the shovel? Like, what shovel?
I don't know. Their own political party's grave, perhaps, is what they're trying to dig.
And then a shout out to Brenda Bailey, who I've interviewed in the past when she was a Jobs and Innovation Minister, is coming to Kelowna here to the chamber. And we asked for an interview. They said they would think about it. And they thought about it, and they said no. Then we said, well, we'll just do one anytime you're available. And she said she's not available, I guess, into perpetuity, I guess, not available.
For the rest of time.
But said that we could chase her down the sidewalk, or we could come to a media scrum, get one question. Is that what they want? Just one question that you're allowed to ask? Or should that question...
Yeah, then they could just walk away.
Should our question be, why won't you talk to the media? That's the question? Like, why do you keep running?
Probably, yeah. But it gives them all the power, because they can just walk away. And also, I think when you see the video of a journalist kind of like harassing a politician almost, following them around, your sympathy as the viewer is automatically for the person being harassed, isn't it? Even if it's a politician, you kind of like, you shouldn't do that. But then that sort of doesn't include the context that's necessary, which is that all requests for a real interview have been declined. So that's the only option, is to kind of chase them around.
There is a video of Mark Carney in Davos before he was the PM. They were trying to get an interview or questions answered. He said, I don't respond to questions in the street. You have to phone my office for an interview. And you think you're going to get
And then my office will promptly tell you to,
Or better yet, the office will just promptly ignore you.
Yeah, the office will. And then if somehow you get them on the phone or something, they'll say, oh, that must have just been a mistake. Let me look at the system. And they just never respond.
Yeah, so there you go. So yeah, so just it's that old movie Catch-22, and until we get an accountable government and repeal of Bill C-18, and also we got to get back to the place. Like again, love it or hate it, in the United States they have access to power. The media has it, and he will even take questions from people that he hates, and he'll even call them out. I would rather even take that if I got to ask questions, and they could berate us the whole time while they're interviewing. And say that we suck and everything, but at least you get to ask some questions.
It's a more honest way to do things, isn't it?
Yeah, because maybe we'll have to use AI and interview AI David Eby, as opposed to the real.
Have a bit more personality, probably.
There you go. Anyway, that's our show for today. It's Wednesday, June 4th, and We'll be back Thursday, 9 a.m., and we'll be back Friday, 9 a.m., hopefully. We hope for the repeal of Bill C-18. If you could do us a favor and help us do that, send a letter to your MP. Send a letter to somebody. Do something. Anyway, thank you for watching, and we'll back tomorrow. Thank you for watching NowMedia.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local,